The story of the Hummer H1 begins not in a design studio in Detroit, but in the halls of the Pentagon. In the late 1970s, the U.S. Army was facing a problem. Its fleet of light vehicles, primarily the M151 Jeep, was a relic of a bygone era. It was small, unstable, and unarmored. The military needed a successor. They didn't just need a new Jeep. They needed a jack-of-all-trades. In 1979, they issued a set of seemingly impossible specifications for a high-mobility multipurpose wheeled vehicle, or HMMWV. It needed to have the payload of a light truck, the agility of a scout car, and the off-road capability of a tank. It had to be able to climb a 60% grade, traverse a 40% side slope, and ford 30 inches of water. It required 16 inches of ground clearance, a figure that is, even today, almost double that of a standard 4x4. 3 companies submitted prototypes, but one stood out: the entry from AM General. It was a masterpiece of military-grade, no-compromise engineering. It was shockingly wide, over 100 inches, for stability. It used ingenious portal axles, a system of gears in the wheel hubs, to lift the axles high above the wheel's center line, giving it that enormous ground clearance. It was a beast. In 1983, AM General won the contract, and the Humvee was born. For nearly a decade, the Humvee was a tool, a piece of military hardware, unknown to the general public. Then, on August 2, 1990, Iraq invaded Kuwait. Operation Desert Shield and later Desert Storm began. And for the first time in history, the world watched a war unfold 24/7 on live television. The stars of this broadcast were not just the generals and the fighter jets, but the ground vehicle that carried the troops across the endless desert. The Humvee. Night after night, the world saw this wide, indomitable truck, painted in desert tan, thundering through the sand. It became an instant, global symbol of American power, technological might, and rugged invincibility. It was the modern cavalry, the vehicle that had won the war. One person watching, captivated, was Arnold Schwarzenegger. At the time, he was the biggest action star on the planet. He had built a career on playing unstoppable heroes, and he saw the Humvee as the real-world version of his on-screen persona. While filming Kindergarten Cop in 1990, he saw a military convoy of Humvees drive past, and his mind was made up. He had to have one. He began an aggressive lobbying campaign, contacting AM General directly. The company was baffled. They made military hardware. But Schwarzenegger was persistent, arguing that if they could build a vehicle tough enough for the U.S. Army, they could sell one to him. AM General realized the marketing potential was enormous. In 1992, they made the historic decision. They took a military-spec M998 Humvee, made the barest minimum changes for civilian legality, like adding rudimentary sound insulation, a basic air conditioning unit, and a slightly more comfortable interior, and gave it a gloss paint job. They called it simply the Hummer. It wasn't a truck. It was a trophy of war, uncaged and released onto civilian streets. The Hummer, later designated the H1, was a glorious absurdity. And that absurdity was its entire appeal. It was a vehicle of shocking, uncompromising statistics. It weighed over 7,000 pounds. It was so wide that it required, by federal law, the same yellow clearance lights as a semi-truck. It had 4-wheel independent suspension, portal axles, and a central tire inflation system, CTIS. A military feature that allowed the driver to inflate or deflate the tires from the cockpit. It was, without question, the single most capable off-road vehicle the public could legally buy. But its owners had no intention of climbing mountains. Its true habitat, its new battlefield, was the concrete jungle. The 1990s was the perfect environment for its release. The Cold War was over, the economy was booming, the stock market was climbing, and the culture of excess was in full swing. Hip-hop was exploding, and with it, a new money culture of extravagant, in-your-face displays of wealth. The H1 was the ultimate expression of this. A Ferrari or Lamborghini was a status symbol. It was fast, sleek, and expensive. It whispered, "I have wealth." The H1 was a power symbol. It was big, intimidating, and brutish. It shouted, "I am powerful. Get out of my way." Celebrities flocked to it. Arnold, of course, had the first two. He was soon joined by Mike Tyson, rapper Tupac Shakur, and countless athletes and movie stars. To arrive at a Hollywood premiere in an H1 was the ultimate power move. Living with one was a testament to its owner's dedication or ego. The interior was famously bizarre. Because the entire engine and drivetrain were pushed high into the chassis for ground clearance, a massive, carpeted engine tunnel, the doghouse, ran down the center of the vehicle. It was so wide that the driver and front passenger were separated by several feet, practically in different zip codes. You couldn't pass a coffee cup, let alone have a conversation. It was miserable to drive. Couldn't fit in a normal parking space. It barely fit in a standard lane, forcing other cars to pull over. The ride was punishing, and the drone from the diesel engine was deafening. But none of that mattered. The discomfort was part of the appeal. Proved you were tough enough to handle it. The H1 wasn't just a vehicle. It was an unapologetic, rolling fortress for the superstar, a declaration that you were not bound by the same rules, or even the same lane lines, as everyone else. The problem with owning a demilitarized war machine is that you are, in fact, driving a demilitarized war machine. The honeymoon period, fueled by 90s bravado, began to end as owners faced the brutal, uncompromising reality of living with the H1. Its greatest strength, its sheer, unapologetic size, was its greatest daily weakness. That 100-inch width was not an abstract statistic. It meant the H1 could not fit in a standard garage, could not go through an automatic car wash, could not navigate a drive-through. Driving it in a normal lane was a white-knuckle experience, with the driver constantly scanning both side mirrors, knowing there was zero margin for error. Parking was a strategic operation. But the real shock was the interior. From the outside, the H1 was a colossus. From the inside, it was comically small. To achieve its 16-inch ground clearance, the entire drivetrain, the engine, transmission, and driveshafts, was pushed high up inside the vehicle's frame. This created the infamous doghouse, a massive, carpeted chasm that separated the driver from the front passenger. They were so far apart, a normal conversation was difficult, and passing something as simple as a map was an athletic maneuver. It was a four-seater with the interior volume of a two-seat sports car. And then, there was its greatest sin, its thirst. The H1 achieved a truly, profoundly abysmal 8 to 10 miles per gallon. During the 1990s, with cheap gas and a booming economy, this was a running joke, a badge of honor, a symbol of your wealth. But as the 90s gave way to the 2000s, the world changed. The dot-com bubble burst. The wars in Afghanistan and Iraq began, and gas prices started a relentless upward climb. The H1's image began to crack. What once looked tough now began to look wasteful. What once seemed powerful now seemed arrogant. The culture was shifting. The age of unironic excess was ending, and a new era of environmental consciousness was dawning. The Toyota Prius, the very antithesis of the H1, was becoming the new, smarter celebrity status symbol in Hollywood. The H1 was no longer the hero. It was rapidly becoming the poster child for a new kind of social villain. Selfish, excessive, and environmentally indifferent. The tide was turning. In 1999, General Motors, then the largest automaker in the world, saw the H1's massive cultural footprint and made a multi-million-dollar bet. They didn't just want to compete with the H1. They wanted to own the very concept of it. GM purchased the exclusive rights to the Hummer brand name from AM General. The deal was complex and, ultimately, fateful. AM General would continue to manufacture the real H1, now officially rebranded as the Hummer H1. But GM would have the exclusive right to develop, market, and sell new vehicles under that legendary name. GM's plan was to transform Hummer from a single, low-volume, hyper-niche product into a full-fledged, premium truck division. They wanted to build a cash cow fueled by America's seemingly insatiable, turn-of-the-millennium appetite for large, imposing SUVs. In 2002, the firstborn child of this union arrived, the Hummer H2. On the outside, it was a masterful imitation, a brilliant piece of marketing. It had the iconic 7-slot grille, the fake hood handles, the massive tires, and the boxy, wide-fendered shape. But underneath, it was a Chevrolet Tahoe in a Halloween costume. It was built on GM's standard full-size truck platform, offering a plush leather interior, a smooth ride, and all the cup holders and creature comforts that GM could provide. H1 purists were disgusted. The H1 was a weapon born on the battlefield. The H2 was a product conceived in a marketing meeting. But the general public loved it. The H2 was an immediate, runaway success, selling over 34,000 units in its first full year, a number the H1 couldn't have matched in 2 decades. It gave mainstream buyers the look of ultimate power without the punishment of the H1. It was the accessible, family-friendly tough guy. In 2005, GM diluted the brand even further with the H3, a baby Hummer based on the much smaller Chevy Colorado pickup truck. The Hummer brand was now a 3-ring circus. The H1 as the authentic, aging patriarch, the H2 as the popular, profitable son, and the H3 as the affordable, compact grandchild. The brand was mainstream, but the H1's soul, its authenticity, was lost. It was now just a high-priced, low-volume halo car for its cheaper, softer, plastic-clad siblings. As this internal identity crisis was happening, the outside world delivered the first of 2 death blows. In August 2005, Hurricane Katrina devastated the Gulf Coast. The national trauma was immediate, and part of that trauma was a new, visceral awareness of the fragility of the nation's oil supply. Gas prices, which had been creeping up, suddenly spiked to over $3 a gallon, a shocking number at the time. The cultural pendulum swung hard and fast. Suddenly, driving a vehicle that got 10 miles per gallon, like the H2, was no longer a funny joke. It was seen as an act of profound social arrogance. Owning the 8 miles per gallon H1 was even worse. Wasteful became the new cardinal sin. Sales for the H1, which were already razor-thin for the hyper-expensive machine, completely evaporated. In 2006, with almost no fanfare, AM General quietly ceased production of the civilian H1. The original Titan was dead. 2 years later, the second and final blow struck, the 2008 financial crisis. The entire global economy melted down. Lehman Brothers collapsed. Credit markets froze, and gas prices, in a final, agonizing spike, hit an unprecedented $4 a gallon. The market for large, inefficient SUVs didn't just shrink. It vanished overnight. General Motors, a company built on a century of selling big trucks and big engines, was hemorrhaging billions. The corporation collapsed and, in June 2009, filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. As part of its government bailout, GM's executives were dragged before the U.S. Congress. They were grilled on their lack of foresight, their inability to build competitive small cars, and their perceived arrogance. The Hummer brand, now a toxic international symbol of the gas-guzzling pre-crash excess that had led to this national disaster, was Exhibit A. It was a political liability. The U.S. government, as GM's new majority shareholder, demanded that the company shed its dead wood. GM, desperate to save itself, put the Hummer brand up for sale. A last-ditch deal was struck with a little-known Chinese company, Sichuan Tengzhong. For months, it seemed the brand might be saved, but the deal ultimately collapsed under regulatory scrutiny. GM was out of options. In April 2010, General Motors officially announced it was shutting down the entire Hummer division. The H1's death was quiet, but the brand it spawned died in a spectacular, public fire. The Hummer H1 was the perfect time capsule. It was a genuine war hero, embraced by a culture of 90s excess. But its legacy was diluted by its own corporate parent, and it was ultimately killed, along with its entire family, by the harsh realities of a new century. It was an icon that simply could not survive the world it had, for a brief, glorious moment, conquered.